Around the world, there are factories making everything from bikes to biscuits, with mega machines mass-producing and highly skilled workers handcrafting. They are the products we use every day. But have you ever wondered how to get the jam into a Jammy Dodger? Or to turn coffee beans into coffee? Or handcraft a bespoke kilt? Well, sit back as we go behind the scenes on the production line. Jammy Dodgers, a delicious biscuity treat that are enjoyed by millions each year. Between its 2 layers of shortcake lies a fruity jam filling that can be admired through the heart-shaped hole on the top of the biscuit. On supermarket shelves for over 50 years, the Jammy Dodger is a favourite of little kids, and big ones too. Named after the Beano comic character Roger the Dodger, these little beauties are as popular as ever. The magic begins in this state-of-the-art biscuit factory, and it all starts with flour and sugar.
So as you can see behind me, we've got a number of silos. They range from 30, 50, 80-ton silos, and this is where the flour and sugar is brought in tankers, and then that's put into the silos ready for use within the factory.
The ingredients are blown into the silos. 450 tons of flour and 150 tons of sugar a week are blown into the factory.
When the ingredients are in the silos outside, the ingredients come over into the service bins above us. They are then transferred down to the mixer below. At this point here, which is our drop point, this is where we add the salt, the sodium, the whey permeate, the small weighted ingredients. They then too are dropped into the mixer below, and that's where they're mixed up, like a big mixing bowl downstairs.
In full flow, the production line uses 1.4 tons of the mixture every hour, which means they need a constant supply of ingredients.
Making Jammy Dodgers, we use about 210 kilos of sugar every hour and 1 ton of flour every single hour.
The first step in biscuit making is mixing all the ingredients into a dough.
So this is the mixer for Jammy Dodgers, so in essence the mixing bowl. So you've got the dry ingredients that have come down from the top. They're then into the mixer. Then we add our liquid ingredients, fat and water. That is then mixed. Once it's mixed into the dough, then discharged into the hopper below. That hopper then is lifted up, ready for processing.
When mixed, the dough travels by bucket conveyor up to a second conveyor, bit by bit.
We're looking for a short crust dough. So small manageable pieces we can manage through the process, and we're looking for a nice short crust consistency.
Short crust pastry has a high proportion of fat to flour, which gives the biscuits a good bite. Not too hard, not too soft. The conveyor feeds the dough onto a moulding roller. It's made out of brass because it's the easiest metal that can be machined for intricate details. It rolls the dough into the Jammy Dodgers tops and bottoms.
This is the exciting part of the process. This is when we first see the iconic pieces of the Jammy Dodger biscuit. We've got the top element of the biscuit, which has got the heart on it, and on the bottom we've got the base. It's got like a pattern around the edge, but then gives you the actual base to deposit the jam on for the heart piece to go on top. And everywhere you go, you know a Jammy Dodger, even if it's not labelled up. As soon as you see that heart filled with jam, you know there's a Jammy Dodger.
The next step of the process is baking the biscuits.
So the next part of the process now, after the biscuit has now been moulded, is to go into the oven, the actual baking process. This is the product entering the oven, and it's going in there for a 7-minute bake.
A conveyor belt feeds the biscuits into a continual oven. It's 90 metres long and heated to 180 degrees centigrade. The biscuits go in, through and out again without stopping.
So now we're walking the length of the oven. It's quite a long walk. There is a 7-minute bake time for the biscuits to get to the end of the oven. So this is the end of the oven. Obviously the product is now baked and ready for the deposit of jam. So what we do now, so the biscuit has got a chance to cool down, they go up into some cooling conveyors, cooled at ambient temperature, and then brought back down when they've cooled enough in order to deposit the jam on. It's not the Jammy Dodger without the jam.
Before they get jammy, the biscuit tops and bottoms are checked for consistency.
At the end of the oven here, we've got an automated system that's sending readings back to our control room, and that is looking for the dimension of the biscuit. They're also looking at depth, and they're also looking at moisture to make sure we've got the right moisture content of the biscuit.
The biscuits are sorted as they're cooled.
The biscuits are coming off the cooling conveyors down into their rows, ready for the addition of the jam. So as you can see, they're coming into rows and being sorted, so we've got tops in one row, bottoms in the next.
The tops and bottoms are sorted out by a machine called the shuffleboard before they're sandwiched together.
So this is the next part of the process, and something that's quite unique in regards to Jammy Dodgers. This is where we get the alignment for the tops and the bottoms, so they're all aligned, so we can deposit the jam and then cap them on properly. So the rows are coming in, tops, bottoms, and you can see from the process, when it gets to the top, it moves them to the correct orientation, so we've got it right going into the jam delivery.
Operators use infrared sensors to double-check there are the same amount of tops and bottoms. Next, it's time for the sticky bit. How do they get the jam in?
So this is the really exciting part of making a Jammy Dodger biscuit. This is where we put the heart into the biscuit, the addition of the jam. So this is where it's deposited. The jam comes in a tanker, put into bulk storage, and then through a number of pipe works, is fed through into this depositor head and deposited onto this biscuit.
Moments later, the jam goes on, and the biscuit deal is sealed.
So this is the final aspect in getting that Jammy Dodger biscuit as the biscuit you all recognise. This is where the top goes on the base where the jam has been deposited. So it's a vacuum suction that picks the top up and then places it on that bottom. And there you find it, the finished Jammy Dodger.
They use around 40 tons of raspberry jam a week, and each Dodger has exactly 4.7 grams of jam.
One of the issues we do have sometimes is the notorious what we put in the factory, the sticky bottom. So if we get too much jam in the biscuit, sometimes it protrudes too high. And in the packing process, which we'll see later, when the biscuit is put on top of the other one, sits down, there you see the sticky bottom.
And sticky bottoms are not the only problem.
So this one, on the rare occasion, can come through to the packing area, something that doesn't align properly. So we've got a bottom on a bottom.
Oh, so sad.
So this is a heartless biscuit.
Next, two robots pick and check the biscuits before they're sent for wrapping.
So this is the automated process in the way that we put the biscuits into the skillets, ready to be wrapped downstairs. But what we've got here, we've got a scanning device, which is looking at the biscuit to make sure the biscuit is perfectly aligned. We've got contrast between the biscuit and the jam, and looking for that iconic heart. So it knows this perfect biscuit to pick up and put in that skillet, ready to send you a quality biscuit down to the wrapping station.
The robot picking arms quickly grab the biscuits and place them onto a cardboard tray or skillet, from where they're transferred via conveyor to the wrapping area. Each of these wrapping machines have been custom made at a cost of over £200,000.
By Jammy Dodgers is the actual packets coming off the line. They've been skilleted, now they've been wrapped, and this is what everyone's. This is our twin pack, 16 biscuits in there, 2 skillets with 8 biscuits in each. This is now being put into the case packer and then delivered direct to our customers. These are delivered all over the world. We even do orders for Canada and the USA. We produce 105 packets every single minute, and on the singles that everyone's more familiar with, 210 packets every single minute, 24/5.
That's 12,600 packets an hour. There's one more thing to do before they go out for delivery. You could call this a perk of the job.
We have to taste them, then we check that there's enough in the packets, and if they're good, then we release them, and you lot get to taste them all. Nom nom.
Good definition, one sticky bottom.
Jammy Dodgers have an 8-month shelf life, but watching these two will be lucky if there'll be any left.
Nice short biscuit. Nice flavoured jam.
Have a bit more.
They make almost 70 million packets of the original 8-pack every year. There's no denying it, surfing is seriously cool. It's a sport enjoyed by millions around the world. From rank amateurs to total pros, they all love heading out for a paddle and catching a wave. But to stand any chance, you're going to need the right board. And those in the know head straight for Otter and their one-of-a-kind, handcrafted surfboards. Whilst most boards are made of foam, founder James Otter decided to go back to surfing's roots.
I was surfing and fed up with how my foam boards were breaking apart. They didn't last, they weren't ever made to last. And because I like making things out of wood, I thought I'd have a go at making wooden surfboards.
The first men and women to ride waves in Hawaii and Polynesia used wooden boards. Foam ones didn't emerge until the 50s.
Skin and frame surfboards have been around since the late 1920s. So there's always been people making wooden surfboards, and so it was a case of seeing what was out there, and then what was available to me in terms of tools and machines.
These handcrafted wooden boards might be 30% heavier than modern ones, but they have an organic feel and a unique handcrafted aesthetic that reconnects riders to surfing's history.
We get our timber from Wiltshire and Somerset. The reason we use those is because they grow in the southwest of the UK, but they're also lightweight, so they're great for the application of surfboards.
Chosen for its buoyancy, this lightweight wood is also highly durable. The natural oils in cedar help prevent it from being damaged by continual use outdoors in water. It takes 80 hours to handcraft one surfboard from this raw material.
We've brought the wood inside, so we're just going to measure out the length that we need and the useful length from this plank. I'm going to cut this down to about 8.5 foot, and that covers the majority of our surfboards that we make. And that's partly also because the end of this plank is a little bit wobbly.
Made to order, these boards cost up to £3,000 each. Making them starts with crafting the inner and outer skins, which are the top and bottom of the board, and the rail strips, its sides. Later on, a support framework goes inside, which will give the finished board most of its strength.
This is going to go into making rail strips. So our boards have a skin on the bottom and the top, and then thin strips that run from the nose to tail. And we use the poplar, which is what this is, for the rails, because it tends to be clearer of knots, so we can get a lot more rail strips without too much wastage.
James handcrafts the surfboards using traditional techniques, but he isn't adverse to using the odd machine. After the planks have been planed, they're cut into even strips, and James double-checks them for accuracy. Now the planks can be glued together to make the top and bottom of the board.
We start with square planks, so they're all glued together. And ultimately, there tends to be anywhere from 6 to 10 pieces of wood that we glue together. So the glue we use for that part is a polyurethane glue, and it's a 30-minute curing glue. Realistically, it's about 3 hours to dry hard, ready for sanding.
Here's one that James has made earlier using a template. The shape is cut out by hand, establishing the basic form of the board.
This one's now ready for sanding, which is what Ali's doing behind me over there. So that brings them down to a really consistent thickness, ready for going onto the surfboard.
The skins need to be thin enough to bend, but not enough to crack and break.
It's at about 9mm now from when it was cut on the bandsaw. It's going to go down to about 6mm. We do 6mm for the top, 4mm for the bottom. It takes a lot more kind of stress with someone surfing.
As well as the sanded skins, the board needs a support framework to go inside to stop it from collapsing. Here at CNC Craft, a computer-controlled laser cutting machine follows James' bespoke design. It quickly and accurately cuts the inner support framework from poplar wood.
So now that we've got this finished framework, it's ready for me to take home and glue back down onto our bottom skin.
Back at Otter, the board is ready to be built. A specially made jig is used to support the freshly sanded bottom skin and bend it into shape.
So I'm just about to piece together the plywood structure, our plywood framework, on top of our skin, which is where it's going to get glued down. So each one of these actually needs to make sure it goes down to the bottom edge for us, which it does. But once that's then glued down, it's going to be an overnight cure to get ready to start putting rail strips on.
The sides, or rail strips, consist of 12 strips of wood glued in place layer by layer.
We're just about to put the next rail strip on here, so I've got to run a bead of glue along the one that's gone down before. And this is going to just slowly build up our rail strips. About 12 that go on each side. So we just do these one at a time, making sure that they're well held.
There are 12 strips to stick in place with quick-drying epoxy resin. It's a painstaking process.
So it's best to leave it about half an hour before we then take the clamps off and apply the next rail strip. At this point, we've finished building up all of our rail strips. We've fixed our nose and tail blocks in place, and we've taken all the clamps off. And we then prepared this surface so that when we introduce our deck skin, it's going to be glued down really well around the perimeter of the board and then across the framework as well.
When all of the glue is fully cured, it's ready for the top to go on. It's a two-person job. Epoxy resin glue blended with sawdust is squeezed on the skeleton frame so they can fix on the top of the surfboard.
A film of glue across the whole of the surface area that we want to clamp. There is an awful lot of work inside, and I always think it's a little bit of a shame when we put the top on because you lose all of that idea of how much work's gone into them. But it is a far quicker and far easier, far less stressful process when there's two of you to share. You ready, Al, if I pass you the tail, mate?
Now it's beginning to look like a surfboard.
I'm really tight for space here. Just gonna go to your touch.
Cool. Strip.
Not much of an overhang here, but I don't think I can afford one because of
I've got a bit.
the wall being in the way.
I got about 5mm here.
After the top skin is lowered down, it's secured with braces and dozens of clamps.
So this gets us our pressure across the middle of the framework, and then we're going to follow around the edge with some other clamps because we rely on that for the strength of the board. So this needs to be glued down really carefully. Nice.
The finished board is left overnight for the glue to set. Then they can get into the shaping.
This surfboard, we've glued the top skin down and I've begun the shaping. So I've started to remove deck skin material to come back to find those rail strips. And I'm now at the point where I'm starting to really define the outer shape of the nose and tail. And to do that, I'm going to start work from the underside. Where you can see we've started to draw out our template, which is what I need to bring us back to, which is going to be our finished shape of the surfboard.
James uses a number of Japanese tools to make his surfboards. These saws are thinner, lighter, and cut much faster than Western saws. Based on tools used by samurai sword makers with techniques that have been passed down through generations of blacksmiths.
Ultimately, you can tinker and toy with them for hours on end, but there comes a point when you feel as though you've completed it as much as you want to.
Once James is happy with the shape of the board, it's time to give it his seal of approval, the maker's mark.
When we decide that they're finished, we need to sign them off.
Then it's sent to be sealed in resin before it's ready for the surf.
So once they come back with their resin finish, they're ready to go in the sea. We're going to have to fit a fin sometimes. This one's got a fixed fin, so we don't need to worry about that. That's something that the finishers do. Proper leash on it, put some wax on it, and then get it in the sea. I think when you've made something yourself, you have a connection to it, and then to go and make more memories with it out in the ocean just takes that connection and that enjoyment a whole other level.
Whether it's a flat white, a double espresso, or a caramel macchiato, we're drinking more coffee than ever before. Some drink it for the taste, whilst others might need the caffeine fix, but it's all made the same way. And helping to satisfy our coffee cravings are Taylors of Harrogate. They make filter cafetiere coffee from beans sourced all around the world. Coffee is made from the seeds of a coffee plant. The beans are roasted, ground, and brewed. Taylors handpick theirs from Africa, South and Central America, and Southeast Asia.
Good quality coffee is coffee that's clean, that's complex, and it has real character. So across the world, you get different sorts of profiles and flavors. What lots of people don't realize is that coffee is a fruit. So when you see coffee beans, really, that's the seed of the coffee cherry. So inside each one of these are 2 beans, and they need to go through quite a lot of process before they arrive to what we have here in the factory.
In their countries of origin, the coffee cherries undergo some initial processing before being delivered to Taylors. In the dry or natural processing method, they're simply picked and left to dry in the sun.
So what that means is that all of that flesh and the skin is still left around the cherry, and that produces a certain type of flavour, really a full-bodied coffee and really good sweetness because of that fruit that's around there.
In the washed processing method, water removes the coffee's fruity material. Then the beans are dried and shipped to Taylors.
And it's our job to blend that and to roast it in such a way that it produces the best product possible. And that's when you'll finish with delicious, really good milk chocolatey flavours and that kind of rich aroma that you expect from coffee.
Today we're going to find out how they create one of their best-selling brands, Lazy Sunday, made from a combination of the dry and washed methods. It all starts with raw coffee beans.
So what you're seeing here is coffee bags from literally every corner of the world. And we'll have about 30 tonnes a day, so we'll have about 60 bags on site. We actually store up to 6 months worth of coffee off-site, so that's about 3,000 pallets that we'll have that is ready to be processed when we're ready to do them.
Any remaining outer layer or parchment from the fresh green beans needs to be removed, or it will affect the roast.
So the green bean is its natural state prior to roasting. There is little bits of what we call parchment just on the outside of the bean, and we want to remove this at this stage to allow us to make sure that it's not going to be in the roast, because we don't want any burnt notes when we're producing and processing the coffee.
Screening rids the beans of any remaining parchment before they are roasted. The 1-ton bag is attached to a specially designed hoist. The bag is lowered into a cage. The operator opens the bottom and releases the beans into the hopper below. Then they're fed into a sifting machine. Sifting the beans is all about shaking off any parchment.
So as it comes through, we see a series of screens that the beans fall through, and we use some balls that gently bounce around to make sure that they come through the series of screens in there. This also then allows the chaff to come off, which is the parchment that surrounds the green bean, to come out through the filter at the bottom.
Paul's bean bouncing balls sift 500 kilos in 15 minutes. The waste all comes out of the filter ready for recycling to be used as biomass fuel.
It's quite dusty, so obviously we want to remove it because we don't want this in the roasting process, because you'll get burnt notes within the coffee. So we'll extract about 20 tonnes a year of this. So it's about 80 kilos a day that we'll see coming off at this stage of the process.
Back to the coffee making. Upstairs, the beans are finally ready for roasting. How long the beans are roasted for and at what temperature affects the acidity of the coffee and its final taste. The longer they are roasted, the more bitter they taste.
This stage now is where we're about to roast the coffee. So this is the control room. This is where our master roasters are here to make sure that we're going to roast the coffee to exactly the same profile that we did when we first created the recipe.
They make 10 different blends of coffee here.
So Lazy Sunday is one of our most popular blends, and obviously it is top secret what's in there, but we can tell you that there's some Latin American coffees in there as well as some African coffees, but that's about as far as I'm willing to go.
What we do know is that these Italian drum roasters rotate the beans evenly and prevent them from being burnt.
What happens is the green bean comes in from the silos, as we've seen. The recipe is dictating how much of which quantity and which origin, and it comes into these slow drum roasters. And we want to do it slowly because we want to really play to the strength of the quality of the beans that we're roasting here today.
They transform 12,000 kilograms of green coffee beans into roasted ones in an hour. The beans can reach temperatures of up to 270 degrees.
It's a fantastic smell at this stage that we want to make sure translates right through to the packing stage. We don't want to lose any of those aromatics that are starting to develop now, so we want to get this product straight into the bag as soon as we can.
The flavour and aroma of the coffee deteriorates quickly, so it's a race against the clock to get it bagged up. The roasted beans are sucked up into a portable silo and whisked into the packing area.
So at this stage you can now see the roasted beans that are all ready to be backed across to the wrapping line.
Before they are sealed in bags, the master roaster checks random beans per batch for quality.
In the control room, once the roast has been completed, we then want to just make sure that each batch has been roasted to the exact colour and moisture that we want it to. So whilst it's followed the profile of the programme, this is the quality check to make sure that what we've got out at the end is what we've expected, and the consistency time after time.
Some of the beans are ground for quality testing. The roast analyzer reflects infrared light upon the sample, and the higher the reading, the more light reflected and the lighter the roast. According to tailors, 97.2 means a medium roast.
So we're now through to the wrapping stage of the process, where we have the coffee coming in from the stillages that's been vacuumed across into the lines and into the wrapping hall.
This is the final stage of the process, the packing. The machine packs the coffee beans in foil bags and uses nitrogen to flush out the oxygen to keep the coffee fresh.
So we've now formed that top seal, which then locks all the freshness into the bag. That freshness then is checked as we go through the process to make sure that we've got the lowest levels of oxygen in the bag when we do our 30-minute quality checks.
Next, the bags are quality checked at random.
We do these every half an hour, and we're producing 72,000 packs within a day. That's 18 million a year. So we want to make sure that every one of them is right as they're going out, so the customer receives it as if it's been freshly roasted straight out the roaster. So on this particular piece of kit here, what we're looking for is oxygen below 1%. So when you look at what we've delivered here, it's actually down at 0.5%, well below where we're trying to get to.
"30 minutes after roasting, the coffee is safely sealed and ready for dispatch."
So that's it, lazy Sunday beans, freshly roasted and ground. We'll do 12,000 of these a day, and each one will be just as fresh as it's just been roasted.
Now it's time for coffee connoisseur Frank to get his fix.
So here I'm going to show you how to make the perfect cup of coffee. Now, one of the most important things for me is using whole beans and grinding them at home. You're looking for 60 grams of coffee per litre of water. So I'll just grind this up. Smells good. Then you probably want about 15 grams. In my case, that was 2 spoonfuls of coffee.
Freshly boiled water is poured onto the freshly ground coffee. And when 4 minutes have passed, Frank can take the plunge.
So the last part, of course, is just pouring out your cafetiere. And then you get that aroma. That tastes pretty good.
A tartan kilt is about as Scottish as it comes. They've been worn in one form or another since the 16th century.
It's part of our tradition, and it makes me feel proud to wear a kilt.
What started as a practical way for commoners to keep warm and dry has now become a national icon.
The kilt was synonymous with Scotland because Scotland isn't always nice and hot and sunny. It was a utility waterproof piece of cloth that was just wrapped round to give warmth. The pleats in the back kept the heat, and people would sleep in it.
Today, they're more likely to be found at a wedding reception than in the wilderness. But their popularity means it's up to traditional kilt makers like Gordon Nicholson to keep his ancient craft alive. Nicholsons are one of only a handful of kilt makers that still use the traditional methods.
There has been a decline in the quality of kilt making over the years. One of my ambitions was to get the quality back to where it was and get everything handmade. A handmade kilt just looks and hangs so much better than a machine-made kilt because all the pleats are individually shaped into the small of the back.
OK, so I know what you really want to know.
Traditionally, when the Highlanders wore kilts, there was no underpants. Bringing it on to modern day, people feel more comfortable wearing something, and some people still like to go traditional.
Right then, now that's out of the way, what is a kilt? Well, essentially, it's just a length of fabric sewed into pleats and wrapped around the waist. They can be found in a huge array of colourful woven tartans. Traditionally, each Scottish clan had their own tartan set. Gordon Nicholson uses 7 metres of it per kilt. And they get it here, from the Scottish borders, a tartan maker, Loch Carn. They've been in business for over 120 years. They make tartan in a dizzying array of designs.
We are the largest manufacturer of textiles still producing cloth in Selkirk. It starts its life with yarn, and the yarn comes in to us in a white format, and we dye to all the colours that we need to make the tartan here at Lochcarron. The yarn itself usually comes from a merino sheep. The yarn is spun here in the UK, but the fibre is grown in Australia.
Although they were once common in Britain, today merino sheep are more likely to be found down under. Their wool is ideal for making kilts.
The merino wool has a longer fibre, it has a lower micron, so it's much finer and gives us a much better quality product. It feels quite greasy, it feels unwashed, it's pretty much straight from the sheep, and it needs to get prepped before we can dye it.
The pattern of a tartan is called a set. It's made up of a series of woven threads which crisscross one another at right angles. The first step is dyeing the yarn.
We're currently in the dye house and we're preparing to dye a maroon shade. Usually for a tartan, the maximum colours that we would use is 6 colours. The most popular are your tea red, scarlet red.
The yarn is dyed for around 2 hours.
We take the yarn out and we put it into a spin dryer. We spin all the excess liquor and water from the yarn. And then we dry the yarn ready for the following process.
The oven dries the yarn at 160 degrees.
The oven's actually baker's ovens originally, so been modified to help us in the yarn process.
Now the hard work really begins. To make tartan, the threads that run up and down the fabric, called the warp, are arranged first.
So this is where we create the vertical threads for the cloth. So threads that yarn up and down the length of the cloth.
The threads are wound taut onto large spools before they can be transferred to the loom.
All of the weaving and all of the construction takes place in the loom. So it's a combination of the pattern, which is the colour, the set, which is the set number of threads within the design, and the construction, which is the interlacing of the threads that create the very special cloth that we call tartan.
Now the weaving can begin. The loom holds the vertical warp threads under tension as a shuttle interweaves the horizontal weft threads, creating a woven fabric.
So behind us, very noisy, but what we're doing here is we're actually weaving the cloth. As I say, within our production, this is a crucial process for us, where we take the warp, the vertical threads, and we put them together with the weft threads, which is the horizontal threads, and we construct our cloth.
Each tartan is checked by hand before the finishing process. It ensures each colour and each thread is in the right place, and that the weaving structure is as it should be.
This is where we mend and darn any irregularities within the cloth, be it yarn, knots, any faults that perhaps happened in the weaving process.
The fabric is woven with a self-finished edge to keep it from unravelling.
This is a true tuck-in selvage, which is what we need when we're doing kilt production.
The fabric for each kilt weighs up to 2 kilos, so saving even a gram in its production makes it more wearable.
We don't want to hem on the kilt because it adds even more weight to what is already a very heavy garment.
When the fabric comes out of the loom, it's ready to be finished.
So we're now in Schofields, which is our cloth finisher. And we're going to put the fabric, which is currently in greasy form, through the wet finishing process to get rid of all of the impurities and to just make it thoroughly clean for the next process.
The heavy tartan is washed to remove any lanolin, natural oil from the sheep, then wrung out to dry.
Now we're taking the fabric into the hydro extraction units, which will remove all of the excess water from the fabric. Then it moves in an upward direction into the scutcher, which will unfurl and untwist the fabric ready for the next process.
Now, I bet you're on tenterhooks about what happens next.
We're now at the tentering machine. This is where the term on tenterhooks comes from. So the fabric is held out to the correct width on tiny little hooks, and it's put through quite a high heat to dry the fabric before it goes through to the final finishing processes.
The phrase being on tenterhooks, to be filled with anxiety about something, comes from these tiny hooks that are used to stretch wool on a tenter. The tenter frame stretches the tartan and prevents it from shrinking as it dries. Now the tartan is almost ready to be made into a kilt.
So we're now at the final finishing process. The fabric is clean. We're going to ensure that the weft is straight, take it into the decating, which is wrapped with a cotton sheet. It's shrunk and then it's stabilised and set. And at this point, the fabric is then ready for garment making.
Now it's back to Gordon Nicholson, where the experts come in. It takes 8 hours to make a handmade bespoke kilt, in a process that hasn't changed in thousands of years.
The kilt's made up of 3 sections, so we have to work out the size of each of those sections.
Each kilt has 2 fabric sections called aprons, the front and the back, as well as the pleated section, made up of 28 pleats.
I've measured the length. Now we need to measure each apron, and we measure the waist first of all. So we would measure from the centre 1/4 of the full waist, and that would be one side of the apron, and then measure the next 1/4, and that's the other side. We do the same at the hip, and then we measure out the whole apron.
A traditional kilt length will equal the length between your waist and your mid-knee. Now it's time for the pleats.
You would take the cloth and line it stripe to stripe. And if you didn't match up the horizontals, it would just look terrible. So that would be it pleated to the stripe, where everyone is identical, and it would be exactly the same size, everyone.
The pleated section is carefully crafted by hand. These folds help trap heat in the kilt, keeping the wearer warm, if a little drafty.
The first pleat is pinned up to the next one, and then they're sewn together. The bottom 2/3, they will be, by the kilt maker, they'll be basted up for pressing, so they'll just be tacked in place, and then they'll be pressed, and they will, hopefully, the creases that are put into these pleats will stay forever.
It's the bottom 2/3 of the kilt that give the kilt its swing.
This is the completed section of the pleats sewn. Once they're finished, we've now got our 3 sections, 2 aprons and the pleated section. We then put on our buckles and straps, depending on the size of the customer.
Aye, done no bad with there.
Ta-da! The pleats help the kilt look full. Kilt perfectionist Gordon has a couple of minor adjustments to make.
So between the bottom of the kilt and the top of the socks, you need to have 3 fingers of leg showing. And the one everyone gets wrong, but you've got right, is the sporran height as well. So you need to have a gap between the bottom of the waistcoat and the top of the sporran as well. One last thing you forgot, and you re-ski and do it. And that just goes right-handed, right leg.
Finally, a kilt to be proud of.